Aldon Smith has been released by the Seattle Seahawks. That was first reported by Mike Garafolo. It was followed up. Brady Henderson of ESPN.com has reported that as well, and he made the comment I kind of think that we've been saying this morning, which is that this doesn't appear to be about a football decision because he had been active and in shape and, in fact, participated a lot in the mock game that they had on Sunday. So this looks like a decision that was made, whether it relates to the assault charge that he was facing in Louisiana or if something else happened. It looks like this wasn't about his football contribution or football shape.
No, this seems like it is something off the field. He was out there contributing with the defensive units that you thought could be the starting units going into the year. And at training camp, the Seahawks are doing a bunch of mixing and matching. But he was out there a lot. And you saw him out there with the right linebackers and the right defensive linemen. So I imagine the Seahawks are pretty disappointed with this news. I think they thought that they actually might be able to rely on him, at least from a football perspective, though I bet they had their doubts once that news in New Orleans popped up this offseason.
Was this a mistake? And I ask that because there's going to be a lot of people that say they went and relied on the wrong guy. I don't think it's a mistake, and here's why. They didn't pay him significant money. This is about one of 90 roster spots, and they were giving him a little more than $1 million a year for an opportunity at making the team. I think that's a reasonable chance to take, that you're not hamstringing yourself into committing to even him making the team. And that if you look at this as they gave an opportunity to a guy who has been a top-tier pass rusher in this league before, who has appeared to get his life back on track after substance abuse issues derailed it, I don't have any problem with them taking a chance on it. And then if it doesn't work out, saying, okay, sorry, but no. We had some guidelines for how you would have to, the off-field behaviors and commitments that we would expect from you to be on the football team. You broke those, and there's just not much latitude here. You knew the deal coming in. I don't think that's a mistake. I have a hard time seeing how someone looks at and says that of the 37 guys on this field that aren't going to make the roster, how he's not worth one of those spots to potentially show that. I mean, he played in the NFL last year and had 5 sacks. Now, granted, 3 of them I think came against you, but still, I don't see the downside of this, even though it didn't work out.
It's one of many roster bodies. It doesn't seem like you invested a whole lot of money into it. There were certainly other options. And I know that Jake Heaps brought up just on Twitter a moment ago some of those other options: Ryan Kerrigan, Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram. They could have brought any of those guys in, but there are injury/are-they-washed concerns with all 3 of those players. And I would say in the case of Houston, too, he did sign with the Baltimore Ravens. Were you going to be able to out-recruit the Baltimore Ravens? And I just honestly ask that question because it does feel like Baltimore always is able to get those guys to come in to the building at the very last minute.
The fair answer to that is to look at what happens at the end of the season and to see how each of those 3 players contribute. All 3 of them cost more money. Cost at least twice as much, I think, as Aldon Smith. Aldon Smith was just over $1 million.
Right.
I think all 3. Melvin Ingram, I think his deal was worth up to $4 million.
Houston's 2, Kerrigan's $2.5 million.
If one of those guys pops, and if one of those guys has 8, 9 sacks, then I think it'll be fair to look back and say, hey, Seattle should have recruited that player harder. Seattle should have, instead of giving a veteran minimum type arrangement with Aldon Smith, should have stretched a little bit to get one of those veterans. I just refuse to go into the idea that it's not worth a chance on someone like Aldon Smith, especially when you're dealing with the question of substance abuse, because if someone does get that ironed out, their life can change immeasurably.
True.
I think it's silly as a team to count on that, but I'm not against giving the opportunity at all.
If it were just that, I would agree with you, but there's also the domestic violence incident that he had during that same stretch, in addition to whatever was taking place in New Orleans as well. And that's where you get into, I think, tricky waters as far as an organization. Public relations-wise, do you feel comfortable bringing in somebody who does have that on their record, regardless of whether it was something that involved alcohol or not? And if you read the reports of that domestic violence incident, it does sound like he was intoxicated during when it took place. I think it was in 2018. But at the same time, I mean, that's something that you have to grapple with as well. And I can understand why some people say, okay, well, you don't even give a guy a flyer like this because you're only going to end up getting burnt in the end if it doesn't work out and if there is another incident that takes place, which I'm guessing is what happened here.
I'm not interested, and I would not use public relations as the barometer for whether and who I give chances to. I would try to come up with a standard that's different than that, and maybe that's naive on my part. I don't have any problem with them signing Aldon Smith and giving him an opportunity to see if everything had been straightened out. And if it doesn't work out, I don't see that. And if something else happened, I don't see that as a condemnation and saying Seattle was wrong to give it this opportunity. They gave him a chance to perform, and he didn't take advantage of it. And that's too bad, but it's too bad for him. I don't feel that that reflects poorly on the organization.
There are other questions about when it comes to, I would say, Aldon Smith, just about his football shape based off of last year. And those were more the questions that I had about him this offseason. Taking a flyer on a guy who was a first-round pick and considered just all-worldly talent when he was drafted, I understand that. But I thought it was weird that Dallas was so willing to move on from him considering how bad that defense was.